Hey, I'm Kirsty, and I have an identical twin sister called Arabelle. We didn't have a normal upbringing, as our mom abandoned us at an orphanage when we were 6. We have our mom's dark blue eyes. That's pretty much all I remember about her. I'm not fully sure why she gave us up. I guess she was young and just couldn't cope. As little kids, my sister and I were close. We used to fool the other kids and the nuns into thinking that we were each other. Arabelle always wore a pink bow in her hair, so we'd both wear one and freak the kids out by double-crossing them in the corridors. Those were good times. But when we got older, everything has changed. I started to become green with envy at Arabelle. Everyone always liked her more than me. The nuns called her Little Cat, and every kid kept surrounding her like she was a sparkling star or something. They all thought she was so sweet and polite. This annoyed me because I knew the real her, and she wasn't sweet at all, if not a completely fake girl. And she just knew exactly what to say and do to get the most from people. Then, when we were 12, a lot had been happening that completely changed our lives. The orphanage had financial problems that could not be saved. Our nuns loved us so much that they didn't want to lose any of us, but they had no choice but to allow the social organization to find us adoptive parents. The nuns didn't want my sister and I to be apart, so they sent us to 2 families in the same town. But the God of justice must be blind as usual. Arabelle was way luckier than me. She was adopted by a wealthier family. My parents loved me anyway, but, well, she received all the best things, and that was just not fair. We went to the same school, and I was so sick of listening to her bragging. When we were at the orphanage, we used to wear the same kind of clothes, but now things were different. Arabelle always stayed in style, wearing the most beautiful clothes. So although we are identical twin sisters, whenever we stand next to each other, she would be like a queen and I would be a maid. She easily got everything I ever wished for. Princess bed, a large window with a sea view, piano and ballet classes, and an amazing mom and dad. She talked about it all the time, and I got sick hearing it. It seemed like all of the greatest things were not enough for her. She didn't appreciate what they gave her and just always wanted more. If I were her, I would enjoy that dream life with gratitude and respect everything I got. Life was so unfair. Why did Arabelle always have the best while a girl like me was suffering from the day I was born? Adopting one part of a twin made our 2 new families close. My new family was always visiting Arabelle's big house for barbecues and nice dinners. To be honest, I did not want to go there at all. It was not a simple family meeting. It was just an event for her to show up. Her parents were so nice, and just by looking at the way they treated her, I could tell that they loved her so much. They often patted her head and called her Puppy. Arabelle acted all sweet. Then, behind their backs, she said this nickname made her feel sick, as she wasn't 5. No one seemed to realize the truth. Arabelle was absolutely not as cute as they ever thought. She actually was kind of insolent, haughty, boastful girl, and most of all, she was a fake. I remember one time when her mother's birthday party was taking place. Her mom looked stunning in that gorgeous dress, and people in the room just stayed silent for a while to show their impressing. Arabelle pretended to be cute and gave tons of compliments to her mom. But as soon as her mom turned her back on us, Arabelle whispered to me, "Look at her stupid smile. She is thinking that she really is beautiful, while everyone knows that I'm the one who looks stunning here." I was so sick of her double life. She was so lucky living that great life, but she had no appreciation for what she already had. And she was so fake. One time, I tried to unmask her true colors. I tried to tell my parents and our mutual friend about how she'd acted behind their backs, but they never believed me and just told me to stop being mean and selfish. They didn't understand a thing about her real version and even scolded me. I was the one who deserved that life, not that fake loser girl. That was when I decided to make a bigger plan. I wanted to replace Arabelle and live her life. I started staring at her work and copied her handwriting. I practiced imitating her voice. We sounded pretty similar, so this was easy. I secretly followed her and her lame friends at school so that I could learn all about their hobbies and habits. But my family was not as wealthy as theirs. I could only stand outside the restaurant, the clothing store, or the cinema. Watching Arabelle enjoy the good life just made my determination grow. When our families met up, I made an effort to get to know her parents more. Her mom likes playing the piano, and her dad likes taking care of his bonsai trees. Her mom can't eat seafood, and her dad is allergic to peanut butter. I jotted down every little detail about her life in my planning book. There were a lot of things I needed to learn until I was fully confident that I could become a second Arabelle and successfully replace her. But then something suddenly happened that made me speed up my plan. This boy called Milo I liked at school started flirting with my sister. And she flirted back. She knew I liked him, but this didn't stop her from agreeing to go on a date with him. She was such a demon. At this point, I couldn't stand her walking around and stealing all the best things I've ever wanted in my life. I had a plan. Back when I was in the orphanage, there was a man who often came to us and said impolitely to the nuns that they should sell him some children to solve their financial worries. Of course, the nuns refused him and kicked him out. He continued to come over a couple of times, and once he gave us his phone number, saying that if any of us got into trouble, we could find him. Then the nun showed up and threatened to call the cops. Well, that was the last time I saw him. I always kept that number because I knew there would be a day I would need it. And that day finally came. I called him, and we came up with a plan to solve my Arabelle issue. He sent her an anonymous message telling her to come to a secluded corner in the park to find out some juicy gossip about Milo. Of course, my nosy sister agreed. The man promised my sister would be sent to another place to work to help him earn money, and she wouldn't be harmed. I left a letter at home saying I'd had enough of the poor life and I'd found a better place to go. I told my parents not to be sad and not to look for me. I hid in a corner of the park and waited for my sister to appear. Then, when they took her, I could easily hop into her life and replace her. There would be no more Kirsty anymore, as I would perfectly be back as Arabelle. Well, the better version of her. Suddenly, I saw a black car stop in the distance. 2 tattooed guys got out of the car. I could see guns in their back. They stopped for a moment to wet a hanky with some liquid thing. This didn't feel right. I knew that this was going way too far. They would hurt my sister, and I was the one who was participating in this sin, and I knew that I would live in guilt for the rest of my life if I ever let it happen. I immediately ran out from where I was hiding, grabbed my sister's hand, and pulled her away. I heard their footsteps right behind us, so I ran as fast as possible to the crowd of people and screamed loudly at the same time to let people around pay attention to us. The other 2 men probably gave up when we ran into the crowd. After we got back to her home, I told her that I happened to be walking past and overheard the guys saying they were going to kidnap her. Then I just ran to reach her as fast as possible without thinking. She hugged me and thanked me for saving her life. She said that she always thought that I didn't like her, and she used to feel that way about me, too. Wow. That moment she came clear that she used to think that I was just a gross, dirty girl and didn't deserve to be around her, and she from time to time tried to pretend herself in front of me just to make me jealous. She was so sorry for her selfish mind and promised to change her character for me. I also told her that sometimes I became so mean because of envy, but facing this dangerous situation made me realize how much she means to me, and I will not let jealousy blind me anymore. Turns out, living a great life was that simple. We just need to talk straight and openly with each other to solve the problems between us. As for my parents, they read the letter I left them and got upset. We had a good talk, and I realized I was being the ungrateful one. Yes, so they didn't have as much money as Arabelle's family did, but they were good people who cared about me. Arabelle hadn't been the only selfish one. I'd been selfish too. Life's good, and Arabelle and I are getting on better than ever. Still, the guilt from what I planned eats me up. Should I come clean about what really happened, or should I keep it a secret and carry on like normal? I mean, it's not like anyone was hurt, right? Hey guys, Stephanie here. I have a question for you. Promise to be honest, okay? Have you ever had a crush on one of your teachers? If yes, I guess you could somehow relate to my story. I'm going to tell you all about my super fine boyfriend, Joseph. I put so much effort into winning him over, but trust me, he was worth every second. So this all began last year when I was a sophomore at college, majoring in performing arts. When it came to boys my own age, ugh, talk about boring. I didn't pay much attention to them as they were so childish and honestly, they just annoyed me. If I had to choose between dating some immature jerk or staying single forever, there was no contest. One day, I was over at my bestie Susie's place. We've been friends since forever, and even though we now went to different colleges, we still met up loads. As we were eating Susie's delicious homemade burgers, we talked about college, outfits, boys, that kind of thing. That's when Susie told me all about the new professor at her college called Joseph. She described him as extremely handsome, tall, intelligent, sporty, and he owned a motorcycle. He sounded far too good to be true, so I convinced myself there must be a catch. Perhaps he had bad acne, or maybe he had a wife and 3 kids or something. He doesn't have acne, he's not married, and he looks like this. She held up her phone. On it was the image of a seriously hot guy. I grabbed the phone off her and scrolled through his social media pictures. Jeez, this guy was so fine. So what if I'd never met him? I knew I needed to make him mine. I needed a plan, so I begged Susie to help me out. She thought I was crazy, but hey, she'd been besties with me forever, so she knew I like to go all out on things. She snuck me into class with her. It was economics. Boring, but staring at Joseph was worth it, and his voice was so dreamy. I knew I couldn't just sit there. I needed to make Joseph notice me. After class, I walked over to him, swished back my hair, and in my cutest voice said, "Hey, great class, but there are a few points I'm struggling to understand. Perhaps you could help me out?" He looked a bit awkward, but he agreed. I blabbed out a few questions about the class, and he waffled out some answers which I didn't understand. I knew I'd have to do better than this to keep his attention, so I continued to sneak into the class. One time, I pretended to fall out of my chair and feigned blacking out. I even dabbed white powder under my eyes before class so I looked extra weary. My hope was that he'd rush over to me and carry me to the infirmary. But no, some stupid other guy had taken that chance from him. Worse still, this doofus was so clumsy that as he was carrying me through the doorway, he knocked my arm against the door frame. Ouch! I bit down on my lip and kept my eyes closed. Jeez, why had my amazing plan turned into a disaster? Ugh. I opened my eyes just in time to witness the nurse coming at me with a huge needle. I screamed out, jumped off the bed, and told her I was feeling much better now. Despite my failed plan in pretending to be sick, I immediately came up with another one. One day, I punctured my own bike tire, then pretended to sadly walk my bike to the parking lot and asked Joseph to give me a lift. He shook his head, said he was too busy, then whizzed off on his motorcycle. I stood there speechless. Worse still, I had to walk my bike all the way home. Another time, I waited until it was just him and me left in class. Then, on my way past him, I dropped my books. Then I said, "Oh no! How clumsy of me," as I bent down to pick them up. Oh yeah, I was also wearing my tightest pair of jeans. I didn't think that there's any way he could resist me in those, but he didn't even help me pick my books up. Instead, he coughed to clear his voice, then said, "Can you hurry up, please? It's my lunch break, and I haven't eaten since breakfast." Typical. I was there looking sexy, and all he could think about was his stomach. I wasn't going to give up now. I hadn't attended a bunch of yawn-inducing economics lectures for nothing. So, thanks to my social media snooping, I knew Joseph's birthday was coming up. On his actual birthday, I had a class with him. Talk about fate! So, I brought him a cake and made the entire class sing happy birthday to him. Then I announced I had a special birthday surprise for him, and I sang out Louis Capaldi's "Someone You Loved." The rest of the class whooped and cheered, but he just looked down at his desk. Okay, so this was getting frustrating. What did I need to do to get this guy's attention? Jeez, I'd tried everything already. That Friday, one of Susie's college friends was having a party, so I tagged along. I sat in the corner and moaned out to Susie how I felt like I was getting nowhere with Joseph. I just didn't get it. Whatever I did, he just didn't seem bothered. I moaned out, "Susie, should I keep flirting with him?" He didn't even lay an eye on me. He was such a tough guy, like an old boot. In fact, a rock had more personality than he did. Then Susie gave me a sign, but I kept saying, "And maybe he was gay or something?" Like, you see, he showed no interest in girls. That's when Susie hit my arm, and when I looked up, I was completely shocked. Joseph was right there looking at me. While I froze in shock, he shook his head, then stormed off. Without even thinking, I immediately stood up, rushed after him, and apologized. He ignored me and hopped onto his motorcycle, so I jumped onto the back of it and refused to move. Please, I didn't mean what I said. Please, just listen to me, I begged. In the end, he passed me a helmet and told me to put it on. I couldn't help but feel excited. I'd wanted to ride on the back of his motorcycle ever since I'd first seen a picture of him on it. OMG. Now it was actually happening! Okay, so this wasn't how I envisioned it, but still, this was amazing. And I made sure to hug my arms tightly around his waist, purely for safety purposes, of course. After about 10 minutes, he stopped at a deserted road. I thought he was going to shout at me, but instead, he turned around and smiled at me. Wow! Without the frown on his face, he looked even hotter. So, what were you saying about me earlier? He asked. Nothing. It was just a misunderstanding. That's funny, because it sounded like you thought I had no personality, and, what was it? Oh, yes, you think I'm gay. I'm sorry. You might be gay, it doesn't matter if you are, you have a great personality. Suddenly, he leaned forward and kissed me. OMG, talk about amazing! I was shocked, but so happy, even though I didn't know what was going on. As soon as he pulled away, I pulled him back so we could continue kissing. Then he said, I'm not gay, and I like to think I have a dazzling personality. I just like playing with you, but it seems like there must be a long time for you to be more mature. But it's okay. I'd train you then. Be my girlfriend. Turns out, he'd noticed me too, but he wanted to see what happened first. Also, he thought I needed to grow up a bit, as my stunts, although amusing, were a bit on the childish side. But he also found the amount of effort I went to get his attention flattering. He told me how he'd only shown up at that party as he'd overheard me talking about it at college, and he wanted to come just because of me. I don't go to his classes anymore, which gives me far more time to concentrate on my actual classes. But we are now an official couple, and I couldn't be happier. So this is the story of how I ended up with the hottest boyfriend known to mankind. My advice to you is to be bold in the pursuit of love. As if you just sit around waiting for it to drop on your doorstep, well, you'll be waiting forever. Go get him, Tiger! That's what I did, and it totally worked for me. So there's no reason why it can't work for you, too. Can you imagine what it's like to be so pretty that people actually bully you because of it? Most of you are probably thinking that being pretty is an amazing thing, but just wait until you hear my story. I'm Jasmine, and I'm 16 years old. And yep, I am indeed named after Princess Jasmine, because the moment I was born, my dad said I looked exactly like her. So growing up, I was naturally very pretty, and the older I got, the more the boys chased me. But I was oblivious to this. Just because I was pretty didn't mean I was arrogant about it. In fact, I was a very caring kid. I always liked to help people in my class and really didn't care about the way people looked. I wanted to help everyone. One time in 3rd grade, there were 3 boys fighting, and I went to help them. But to my complete shock, they were fighting over me. Our teacher eventually broke up the fight and had to split them all up and make them sit on the opposite side of the classroom, away from me. I was so shocked. Why would people fight over me? Well, by the time I was in 5th grade, I'd gotten even prettier, and at one point, there were 5 guys fighting over me. One day, 2 of those guys, Jack and Tyler, were both running towards me from opposite sides of the playground. I was just standing there watching them come towards me, and I panicked and quickly jumped out of the way. They both ended up bashing into each other and fell over. Honestly, it was so funny. I helped them up, but inside, I was dying of laughter. Most girls would probably love getting attention like that, but it drove me crazy. I just wanted people to like me for who I was, not because I was pretty. Even though I got tons of attention from boys, the girls didn't like me. There was one girl called Mia who hated me so much, she actually bullied me. She would always go out of her way to do horrible things to me. Like this one time where she jumped on me in gym class and broke my right arm. She pretended it was an accident, but I know she deliberately did it. And obviously, I use my right arm for everything, so it was torture. I cried so much because for months I couldn't write anything, and writing was my most favorite thing in the world. And that wasn't the only horrible encounter with Mia. One time I was at the park with my big brother, and he left me alone on the swings so he could go hang out with his friends. As soon as he was out of sight, I saw Mia heading towards me. She looked angry, and I quickly closed my eyes because I was so scared. I thought she was going to hit me. But suddenly, I heard someone running, and I opened my eyes just in time to see my brother grab her arm to stop her from hitting me. He was protecting me, but then he took it too far. He hit her in the face so hard, he knocked her front tooth out. She was screaming and crying, and my brother just grabbed me and made me run out of the park with him. After that, Mia didn't bother me anymore. I moved up to middle school and never saw her again, but my life didn't get much better. You see, at my new school, the uniforms were so ugly. I went from being the pretty girl to a complete tomboy. We had to wear these red polo shirts with baggy nude pants. Honestly, it was not a good look for me. Sure, I was glad not to be the girl guys were fighting over anymore, but I didn't like feeling ugly in the uniform. Then, when we had the school dance, we were finally allowed to wear whatever we wanted. I decided to wear my favorite little black dress that showed off my curvy body. As soon as I walked through the doors into the dance, all eyes were on me. I couldn't believe how much of a difference my outfit could make. All the guys kept trying to get my attention, but I just wanted to dance. It was such a fun night, but the next day was crazy. I got to class and we had to hand in our essays. I went to give mine to the teacher, and when I was walking back to my seat, a girl called Paloa stopped me and said, "Jasmine, everyone knows your melons are fake. You had plastic surgery, didn't you?" She said it so loud, and everyone started laughing, even my friends. I was so embarrassed and just ran out of there crying. Why would she say something like that? To make matters even worse, when I eventually came back to my desk, I noticed someone had messed with my artwork. I love drawing, especially Dragon Ball characters, and I'd drawn a Goku that morning. Someone had ruined it by drawing fake boobs, and then underneath they'd written, "You are so fake." I honestly wanted to run out of there and never go back. People were being so mean. Suddenly, a guy called Peter, who was always quite horrible to me, grabbed the drawing and ripped it up. I didn't understand how people could treat me like this. The rest of my middle school life was pretty much the same. I felt miserable, and I thought finally high school would be better. But on my first day, I was sitting alone and I heard a group of girls whispering about me. They were all really pretty and popular, and I tried to ignore them, but two of them came over to me and sat on either side of me. I felt terrified, but suddenly one of them said, "Oh my God, you're so pretty. How come you're eating all alone? You can come sit at our table because you're pretty enough." After my middle school experience, I was so happy that people were being nice to me again. Soon I started hanging out with the pretty girls all the time, and the leader of the group, Ashley, she asked me if I had a boyfriend, and when I told her I didn't, she laughed and said, "Don't you worry, we'll find you one." But I didn't want them to find me one, because the more I hung out with them, the more I realized that the guys they liked were total troublemakers, and I wasn't interested in those type of guys at all. After a few weeks of hanging out with them, I realized they were too much. I didn't want to spend my days gossiping and being surrounded by drama. Just because I was a pretty girl didn't mean I had to hang out with the pretty girls. I heard there was a new kid at school, and the girls were all making fun of him for some reason. I didn't like what they were saying about him. And so the next day, I decided to go introduce myself and see if he was okay. Well, I have no idea why people were making fun of him. He was gorgeous. Drop dead gorgeous. But he was so shy, and so I just sat on a table near him and stared at him nonstop. I eventually plucked up the courage to go and introduce myself. "Hi, I'm Jasmine," I said. "Nice to meet you." Then he said, "I'm Chris. Hi." And after that, we got chatting. and I couldn't believe how much we had in common. I could see everyone staring at us chatting, but I didn't care. Chris said he'd worried that no one would want to be his friend, and I told him that I would be. After that, we started hanging out every day, and I quickly fell for him. He was kinda nerdy, but I liked that about him. One day, before Valentine's, he asked me what my favorite candy was. Then on Valentine's Day, he surprised me with flowers, a box of chocolates, and a teddy bear. Then a few days after, he gave me another surprise. He'd ordered all my favorite candy, Skittles, Sour Patch Kids, and Airheads. I was so happy. It was the most romantic thing anyone had ever done for me. And he wasn't interested in me just because I was pretty. He actually cared about me. We started dating soon after that, and then I had my first kiss. It was kind of funny because I'd never kissed anyone before, so I had no idea what I was doing. But it felt nice, and after a while, I really got the hang of it. And now we're so in love. It's been 7 months since we started dating, and I never could have imagined my life could be so good now. We're even planning to get married in the future. I know we're still young, but when you know, you know.
Hello, everybody. I'm Caitlin. My short height and young looks may make me look like a kid, but appearances can be deceptive. I'm actually 34 years old. I know it sounds crazy, but it's all down to my super rare condition called Turner syndrome. It's a disease that only females have. It means I only have one X chromosome, and as a result, it means I look far younger than I am. And I'm in the same height as your average 11-year-old. So even though I'm an adult, I pass for a kid. You may think this sounds great. Sure, I can go crazy in a candy store without raising suspicion, but other than that, looking way younger than I am is hard to live with. I'm the oldest of 3 kids. My bro Jeremy and sis Dayla may be younger than me, but because of my condition, they both look older than me and they tower above me. I'm going to take you back to when I was 16 and my parents noticed that not only did I look younger than Dayla, but I was shorter than her too. I told myself it was nothing. I was just a slow developer, that's all. But my mom thought otherwise, so she dragged me to 7 different doctors. Then voila, one of them diagnosed me with Turner syndrome. Naturally, neither me nor my family had ever heard of this condition before. I mean, come on, a disease that makes someone stay young forever? It sounds like something out of a movie. Relax, I'm not dying or anything, but it does mean I'll never look like an adult. I realize people spend a bunch of money to look young, yet here I am, doing it without even having to try. But trust me, looking like a little kid when you're not one can be problematic. For instance, high school was a nightmare. I had this one friend called Alice. At first, we were pretty inseparable, but as time passed and she aged and I didn't, she began to single me out and join the other girls in making fun of me. They pretended to make baby crying noises when I walked past them, and one of them even put a baby doll in my locker with a picture of my face stuck to it. I stopped being friends with Alice after that, and watched on with sadness as other girls my age started dating boys, but no guy ever noticed me. Like seriously, they literally didn't notice me, especially the tall ones. And for the few that looked down and saw me, well, they made corny jokes like, "Hey, Caitlin, how's the weather down there?" And, "Someone better call kindergarten as they're missing a kid." However bad the teasing got, Dayla and Jeremy were always there for me. From cheering me up when I felt down, to passing me the cookie jar off the top shelf. I may be small, but I'm determined. So I made it to college and ended up qualifying as a teacher. On my first day of my new job, I was extremely nervous, but I reassured myself that I could do this. On seeing me for the first time, my students were surprised and clearly confused. One of them spoke and said, "Excuse me, little girl, are you lost or something? Where's your mommy?" Wow, the nerve of that girl. As if she just said that. I decided to take a deep breath and said, "No, I'm your teacher. I may look like an 11-year-old child, but I assure you that I'm not." They all snorted and laughed, and one kid said, "Yeah, right." So I passed my ID card around the class. I couldn't help but smile as one at a time they looked down at my ID with shocked faces. Priceless. During my first class, I taught my students about Turner syndrome so they could understand it. After that, they were respectful toward me. Apart from this one boy who clearly viewed himself as the class clown. Then he said, maybe next time you should wear a chipmunk outfit or maybe an elf costume because that will totally fit you. The whole class laughed. So I gave him 4 weeks detention. I can assure you there was no laughter after that, nor did anyone make any comments about my condition again. One lunchtime, I was sitting in the staff room when the science teacher named Henry came over and sat next to me. Then he smiled and said, "Hey, how's your first week going?" Talk about handsome. My legs instantly felt like a jelly. We started talking about my condition, and he was very sweet about it. "I don't mind. I studied Turner syndromes before. It's okay because I like you. It's who you are." His words made my heart flutter. He was so sincere and kind. We started hanging out more, and then we started dating. Don't tell anyone, but sometimes I found him so irresistible that I couldn't resist kissing him in the janitor's closet. Of course, my condition caused us some problems. One time Henry and I were in a bar. I asked the bartender if I could have some vodka. He said, "Sorry, kiddo, you're too young to have some alcohol." Even when I showed him my ID, he still wouldn't serve me. Unbelievable. Another time we were kissing on a bench in the park. It was so romantic. Until some old lady screamed at us, "You sick pervert, how can you kiss a little girl?" To make it even more awful, 2 police officers showed up and I had to explain myself to them and show them my ID. Luckily, they believed me, and Henry wasn't arrested, but the old woman continued to give Henry dirty looks. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get any more awkward, we popped into the grocery store. Henry had just passed me the cereal, which I was too short to reach, when I heard someone behind me say, "Caitlin? Is that you?" Oh boy, I recognized that voice. I turned around and, yep, it was my old childhood friend Alice. She smirked and said, "Wow, you haven't changed a bit." But I'm not surprised. You never change. I replied, "Don't you have somewhere else to be? I'm hanging out with my boyfriend." She gave a shocked look as she looked at Henry. "Wait, you're dating her? Isn't she, a bit on the short side for you?" He just shrugged and told her, "I don't care what you think of her, as she's the most amazing woman I've ever met." She flicked her hair and replied, "Why don't you date someone your own size? I mean, look at me. I'm beyond sexy." "Yeah, from space." I rolled my eyes. Everyone in the store started laughing at her. Now look who's embarrassed. You know what they say, payback's, well, you know the rest. Regardless of all this drama, Henry stuck by my side and continued to support me. He even arranged for our families to meet. We met up in a restaurant. When Henry's parents saw me, they were kind of surprised. His mom greeted me with a hug, but his dad just glared at me. My parents keep asking Henry questions while Dayla and Jeremy chatted with Henry's twin sisters about sports. Things were going fine until out of nowhere, Henry's dad slammed his hand on the table and said, "I can't take this anymore. You shouldn't date my son. He's too good for you. Your shortness is going to ruin his life." I tried to keep composed, but inside this hurt more than I can possibly express into words. Henry stepped in and said, "That's enough, Dad. You can't treat people like that just because they're different. Shame on you." Then he got down on one knee and took a ring out of his pocket. "Caitlin, I love you, and I always will. So will you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" At first, I was speechless, but then I found my words and said, "Yes, yes, yes, I will marry you." I was crying with joy, and my family and his mom were clapping and hugging each other. But then Henry's dad shook his head in disgust. Then he stormed off. On our wedding day, Henry's dad refused to show up. I felt so bad for Henry, but he told me we shouldn't let his dad's bad choice ruin our perfect day. I was about to walk down the aisle when his dad burst into the room. Oh no, was he going to ruin the wedding? Everyone was staring at him, and I thought I was going to collapse from the shock of it all. But then he said, "I'm sorry for how I acted. It was wrong of me to judge you on your condition. I would very much like to be here for your wedding if you'll have me." I cried out, "Yes, of course, take a seat." Our wedding day was magical, and so was our life together. Things are still going well for Henry and me, and I'm now the happiest I've ever been. I may have the appearance of a child, and yes, my condition is never going to go away. But my life as an adult is amazing, and this is all thanks to the remarkable people I have in my life. I'm so fortunate to have them supporting me, and with them by my side, I'm able to find my inner strength and conquer any obstacles that get in my way, however big they may be. Hi, I'm Diane, and I'm 20 years old. I fell in love on the first day of college. I'm not even joking. I'd promised my mom I'd focus on my studies and wouldn't fall for any boys, but one look at Brett, and I broke that promise immediately. We had an instant connection, and pretty soon we were spending every waking moment together. I can't help but think that if I hadn't met him, maybe I'd never have found out the dark secret my mom and aunt had been hiding from me my whole life. You see, my mom raised me alone, and I had no idea who my dad was. Let's just say it seemed like my mom got around, so she really didn't want me to get into the same kind of situation as her. I decided to keep Brett a secret. She didn't need to know, right? When I went home for Christmas vacation, I missed Brett so much, but I couldn't let my mom know about him. So I'd wait until she went to bed before calling him. One night, she caught me, though. She must have gone to the bathroom, and suddenly I heard footsteps. She was standing right there. I didn't know how much she heard, but I was so embarrassed. I thought she'd grab the phone from me and tell me off, but instead, she just walked back to bed. It was so weird. In the morning, she was sitting at the kitchen table grinning and said, "Well, who is he then? Invite him over. Don't be shy." I couldn't believe it. I thought she'd freak out, but instead she wanted to meet him. She suggested we invited him over for dinner, as my aunt was also coming over that night. My mom and my aunt were like best friends, and had basically raised me together, so I was excited for her to meet Brett too. He took the bus that afternoon, as he was desperate to see me, and my mom said he could stay in the spare room. As soon as my mom saw Brett, she grinned at me and whispered how handsome he was. Then we sat down to dinner and started chatting. My mom had so many questions for him, and it was a bit awkward. She wouldn't shut up, and it made her seem so nosy. She asked where he'd grown up, and what his mom and dad did, and even asked for their names and stuff. Meanwhile, my aunt just sat there quietly, and then at one point she got up from the table and went out into the garden. My mom ran after her, and Brett looked at me worried. I had no idea what was wrong. 10 minutes later, my mom came in and her expression had totally changed. She went from being warm and friendly to totally strict and cold. She looked at both Brett and I and said she decided I was far too young to have a boyfriend staying over, and then asked Brett to leave. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was 20 years old. She was being so rude. So I said to her, "Mom, why? Please, can he just stay?" I was almost begging her, but she looked so serious and firm, and I knew she wasn't going to change her mind. Brett was even more shocked than me. I mean, it had been my mom who'd invited him in the first place, and now there she was, shooing him away. He quickly grabbed his stuff and ordered a taxi. I was so upset I didn't even say bye to him. I just burst into tears and felt so angry at my mom. Right after Brett left, I ran upstairs and locked myself in my room, and my mom stood on the other side begging to speak to me. She said there was something she needed to tell me. I refused to come out and instead sat on the floor on the other side of the door. I could hear my mom crying and knew this was serious. She said the reason she didn't want Brett to stay was because he was actually my half-brother. No, I didn't understand. I asked if my dad was also Brett's dad, and then I got angry. I thought my mom hadn't known who my dad was. I opened the door and I was about to start shouting at her when she told me what was really going on. I'd been adopted. Well, actually, I'd been kidnapped by my aunt when I was born. It's a long, shocking story, but basically my biological parents were this rich couple, but they were struggling to get pregnant. My biological mom had a best friend called Ashley, who she told everything to, but Ashley secretly had a crush on my dad. She seduced my dad until one night they slept together, and Ashley ended up getting pregnant. My dad was so happy and promised Ashley he'd help raise the baby, but that he couldn't divorce my mom. This made Ashley angry. She wanted my dad all to herself and wanted their kid to become the heir to his company. At the same time, my biological mom fell pregnant with me, and when my dad found out, he quickly forgot about Ashley and tried to forget about the mistake he'd made that one night. This, of course, made Ashley even more angry, but she still pretended to be friends with my mom. When my mom went into labor with me, my dad was away on a business trip, and Ashley paid someone to sneak into the hospital and kidnap me. That person turned out to be my aunt. She did it because she was desperate for cash, so she snuck in, dressed up as a nurse, and in the middle of the night stole me away. But she wasn't cold-blooded enough to just throw me away or leave me at an orphanage. So she took me to her sister's place and told her that she'd found me abandoned on the street. Her sister, who had never wanted to get married but had always wanted to be a mom, was so happy and decided to raise me. But then a few days later, it was all over the news, a missing baby. There was an exact description of what I'd been wearing, and even a photo of me just after I'd been born. There was no denying that I was the missing baby. My new mom confronted my aunt about it and found out the truth. My aunt said there was no way they could return me as my aunt had already spent all the money she'd been paid to cover some debts. And she didn't want to go to prison, so they decided to raise me as if I really was their own. That secret would still have been hidden from me if I hadn't brought Brett home. My mom was so shocked that I'd brought my dad and Ashley's son into her home and introduced him to her as my boyfriend. As my mom told me all of this, I just sat there frozen. This was absolutely unbelievable. I felt sick. They'd lied to me all these years, and even worse, my boyfriend was actually my half-brother. My whole life was one big mess. "I hate you, Mom, and I hate you too," I said to my aunt. "You helped that evil monster Ashley get what she wanted, and now you've ruined my life and taken away my family." My mom reached out to hug me, but I didn't want her near me. We both just sat there crying. She tried to calm me down and get me to relax. Then she sighed and said, "I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. Your whole life I've been trying to make it up to you. I thought my love for you would be enough. As for Ashley, well, I heard she didn't get what she wanted in the end." "Wait, why? I don't understand." "But she successfully kidnapped me, right?" I wiped my tears and looked at her. "Yes, sweetie, but her main goal was to become your dad's wife. But that obviously didn't happen." Then she continued, "After my aunt had kidnapped me, Ashley had given birth to Brett, and was so happy thinking that my parents no longer had a baby, and that my dad would now leave my mom and go live with her. But that's not what happened. Yes, their dear daughter was taken away, but my dad still stayed with my mom and loved her even more. My dad didn't get together with Ashley, but apparently my dad had still been helping raise Brett until now. There's definitely no bad blood between them because I've heard Brett talk about his dad quite a lot. Now there was only one thing for it. I had to find my biological parents and find out the rest of the story. They deserved to know I was alive. But now, what would I do about Brett? I'd have to break up with him somehow.
Hi, Ken here. I'm a breast specialist doctor. I'm trying not to be shy when I'm telling you this. It may be a bit awkward talking about my career. But because of it, or due to it, my life turns to be a drama. Well, I appreciate how hard it is for my patients to visit me. Let's face it, taking your clothes off in front of a stranger isn't easy for anyone. Yes, trust me, I've seen it all before, and it's no big deal. I'm just doing my job. I first met Gemma in my surgery. She'd found a lump and wanted me to examine it. When I checked it with my hand, this startled her, and her natural reflexes caused her to punch me in the face, and I passed out. I woke up a few minutes later to find both her and a nurse gawping down at me. My nose was still bleeding. I must have looked a right sorry state. She kept on saying sorry, but I reassured her that it was quite all right. And then with her permission, I continued with the examination. I found something, so I carried out a biopsy, and in the end, I had to tell her that she had breast cancer and needed to have a mastectomy. I could see her getting quite upset. I got used to patients' tears as they heard bad news. But this girl was so strong and brave. She just asked me some questions about the surgery and calmly left. Then, to my surprise, she impressed me more day by day. For the next few weeks, she brought me lunch every day. I thought she was worried I might bear a grudge for her punch or something, and this was her way of making it up to me. The food she brought was delicious, and I have to admit, seeing her was the highlight of my day. She was so kind-hearted and strong. What she was going through was horrible, but she never let it get her down. Instead, she walked over to my room with a skip in her step and a smile on her face. Soon, I fell in love with her, and I knew she felt the same way, as our chemistry was obvious. But she was my patient, and I had my career to think about, so I knew I needed to be careful. Still, I couldn't seem to resist her or her cooking. I was busy at the hospital all day, so I never had time to date, while she was a martial arts instructor for kids and only worked in the evenings, so she had a lot of free time. So she cooked lunch for me every day and brought it to the hospital to eat with me. Even after her successful mastectomy, she still showed up with food. That was when I couldn't stop myself from confessing my feelings for her, and she said yes. Sometimes she had to wait many hours until I finished seeing my patients at the surgery. When she was asleep waiting for me, she looked like a little kitten. But gradually, that kitten turned into a tiger, and I soon discovered that this tigress bites. Ouch. Things were complicated talking about my duties at work. My patients are mostly female, and when I see them, I need to, what I have to do. Of course, Gemma also knows this because she's been examined many times already. She always fantasized that I would fall for another girl, one who in her eyes was complete. I tried reassuring her that I loved her and only her. Surgery or not, in my eyes, she was perfect. But regardless of how many times I told her this, she failed to believe me. She had a point that no girl could accept her boyfriend touching other women in their things, and even discussing that with them daily. I told her, normally the human body is a beautiful product of nature, but in the eyes of a doctor like me, it's just the same mass of meat. Would you find a chunk of meat beautiful? Isn't that shivering to think like that? Then she argued, so in your eyes, I'm just some chunk of meat, huh? Ugh. I tried telling her it wasn't like that, but geez, she's stubborn. It took me ages to calm her down. Every day she showed up at the hospital and glared at me as the beautiful young women came in and out of my room. Her actions hadn't gone unnoticed by the nurses, who told me that she was making the patients feel uncomfortable with her scanning eyes and judgmental expressions. I told them it was nothing. She was just going through a hard time, that's all. And please be understanding that it was natural for her to compare herself to other women. As I told them that, I was not sure if I could stay sympathetic for her coming behaviors. That afternoon during a late lunch, Gemma asked me if the 8th girl entering my room was beautiful. Oh my Jesus, the only person I can remember was the one who walked out of the room 5 minutes ago. I only remembered that was the one with the cyst, but I didn't remember her face. Why do you have to think so long? Are you recalling her figure? You just need to say she's not beautiful, right? I muttered out, yes, right. Not beautiful at all. She frowned at me. That means you still remember her. What about her impressed you so much? I stiffened. What was wrong with women? A week later, when she brought me lunch, she asked me, do you and the red dress girl know each other? As she'd been here at least 3 times in a row already. Every time she dresses very well. Whoever wears a red dress to the hospital? Isn't it normal for patients to come see the doctor regularly? No, it's not normal. I want to see her files. The 3rd person from the bottom up. Come on, you know I'm not allowed to do that. Then you are not allowed to eat either. Geez, this was ridiculous. She wouldn't quit though, so in the end, I gave in and showed her the records. This girl had just had breast augmentation surgery, so that was why she came to be checked so often. Gemma just grinned and said, "I knew it! Those are fake!" I thought this would be the end of the matter, but it turns out it was just the beginning. Gemma bombarded me with questions about the red dress girl, such as did I find her attractive? I told her what I believed she wanted to hear, such as she was the only girl for me, and so on. But curiously, during the following days, she stopped going to the hospital. She just texted me a few messages every day and just disappeared. Maybe I should have chosen to be a specialist in psychology, as I may have been a good doctor, but I had no idea what women were thinking. A month passed, and she didn't show up at the hospital at all. I was so relieved at first, but couldn't stop wondering what my sassy girl was planning to do. Meanwhile, it was strange that the red dress girl popped up more and more, even though her health was completely fine. Then one day, she turned up saying she had pain and itching. I scanned and tested her, but couldn't find the cause. "Hey lady, you are healthier than me. If you are not sure, please do a checkup once a month, or I can also refer you to another hospital." "Where's your girlfriend?" she interrupted me. "Sorry?" "She told me to wait and see, but I can't wait anymore." "Where is she?" "Huh? What was going on?" Just then the door opened and in barged Gemma. Oh my God. She looked like a different person. She was dressed so sexy, not cute like before. As a doctor and as her boyfriend, I immediately realized that she'd got breast implants. Before I could speak, a man stepped in and put his hand on her hip. Then he gave a confused look as he looked at the patient and immediately removed his hand from Gemma's hip. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded to know. Gemma stared at the girl and said, "I told you that if you continued to deliberately flirt with my boyfriend, I wouldn't leave it alone." The man, who was the same age as my dad, looked at Gemma. "What flirting?" Then he looked over at the other girl. "Are you cheating on me?" Then the red dress girl grinned at him and said, "Who is the cheater now?" What? They two were a couple or something? But what was my girlfriend doing here? Gemma turned to the man. "She started it first. I have proof. I have taken pictures of the time she approached my boyfriend. If you two get divorced, you will need it. You will not want to divide your property with a wanderer, right?" I shouted out, "What the hell are you doing?" The man looked at Gemma. "You played me? You seduced me just because she flirted with your boyfriend and you wanted revenge?" God, the door was still open and doctors, nurses, and patients came to see this chaos. They just pointed and thought this was a jealous scene. So it transpired that Gemma tried warning the red dress girl off me. And when that didn't work, she tracked down her husband and seduced him. And she even got breast implants for that silly plan. OMG, she was crazy. After that incident, I was severely disciplined for affecting the image of the hospital and was forced to work in a volunteer clinic in Mexico for 6 months without any payment. Yup. Now I'm in Mexico to pay the price of the mistake of... No. What was my fault? I didn't do anything. So the moral of the story is, don't get involved with a patient, however good their cooking is. Trust me, it's so not worth it.
Hi, my name is Cammy, short for Camille, the same girl as the girl out of the TV series The Originals, and I'm 17. A few years ago, I started feeling super insecure about my appearance, and it led me to make a pretty big decision, which almost made me lose the cutest boyfriend ever. So, my two besties, Amy and Lizzie, they are so beautiful. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that I'm ugly or anything, but they both have one thing that I don't have: womanly curves. Standing next to them made me feel as flat as a plank, and due to their curves, boys always notice them over me. Worse still, they even got wolf whistles and compliments from the boys, while all I received was lame jokes about my body. Talk about annoying! Hearing remarks such as, "Geez, Cammy, you're so flat. I could use you as a surfboard." Or, "Cammy, I think you should go back to kindergarten and grow a bit." Well, these words stung. I tried laughing it off, but on the inside, I was hurting so much. Things got even worse when Amy and Lizzie both got super cute boyfriends, but no boys were interested in me. Not only this, but my parents also getting divorced. So at this point, I felt like I had nothing left. So I decided that I had to do something. During the summer vacation, I bought some bras and started stuffing them. At first, it kind of felt uncomfortable and inconvenient because the stuffing made me hot and even hard to breathe since it was summer after all, but I eventually got used to it. Then, I tried posting some photos of me in cute tops on my social media pages. The comments were all compliments from my lovely people. They said I looked so pretty in my new appearance. So, throughout the summer, I gradually began to stuff my bras a little bit more, so it looked like my chest was naturally getting bigger. Then, the first day of school arrived. It was still pretty hot outside, so I decided to wear a cute top to show off my new curves. When I arrived at school, Lizzie and Amy both hugged me and told me I looked great. Although they also added in that I always had. My friends were the best. Then something crazy happened. This one boy who used to tease me came over and said, "Oh wow, surfboard girl. I mean, Cammy, you're looking hot." I smirked at him, then walked away. For the next year, I carried on stuffing my bras. Talk about a hassle, but it paid off as I finally felt accepted. No one teased me anymore, and I didn't feel self-conscious standing next to my gorgeous besties. It wasn't all a breeze, as one day after school it was so hot that as soon as I reached my bedroom, I immediately took the paddings off and threw them on my bed. Talk about comfortable! I went to the bathroom, and when I came back, my mom was standing there holding my bras in one hand and the padding in the other. "Cammy, what's going on?" she asked. I turned as red as a lobster and then replied, "I just feel more confident in the padding in. That's all. It's no big deal." Then snatched the bra back from her hand. Mom let out a sigh. "Sweetie, I know it's perfectly normal to feel insecure about your body at your age. It's up to you what you do, but I just want you to know that you're perfect just as you are." This meant so much to me, so I ran over to my mom and I gave her a big hug. Although I know that my mom was right, I just still felt more confident with my padding. Then the next summer arrived, and I and my family went on a trip of a lifetime to this luxury resort in Africa. Even though my parents were divorced, they still got on great as friends, so we all went together. Okay, so stuffing a bikini top wasn't as easy as a bra, so I spent my allowance on a couple of padded bikini tops so I'd feel confident lounging by the pool. A few days into my vacation, and I met this boy called Liam on the beach. OMG, he was so good looking. And you know, my padding gave me the confidence to catch his eye, and soon he came over and started chatting to me. Turns out that as well as being hot, he was also very sweet. He told me that he'd been born in Africa and his aunt owned this resort, and now his family stays there every summer. I also found out we're from the same country. Awesome! And so we started dating. We would sit outside and watch the sunset, horse ride on the beach, and go for picnics. I had the best summer ever with him. When we came back home, we kept on dating, but it was a little harder since he lived in another city. And then there was my other problem. He didn't know I padded my bras. Although we were taking things slowly, I knew he wanted to take things further. He never pressured me or anything, but I started to feel anxious during our makeout sessions. I got so down about it all. How could I possibly have a decent relationship when I was hiding the secret? I didn't know what to do anymore, and I thought my only options were to tell the truth or break up with him. Liam made me so happy, but I guess he wanted someone with curves, not some shapeless girl who was trying to be something she wasn't. That weekend, Liam would come to visit me, and I knew what I needed to do. But then something happened which took the decision out of my hands. That day, I was laying on my bed when Liam suddenly barged in. OMG! As soon as I saw him, I immediately covered my breast, but it's too late. Of course I wasn't wearing my padding, so he saw me. The real me! He looked so shocked, then ran out of the room. I didn't even try to run after him or explain because I knew it was too late. It turned out my mom had allowed him to come into my house as he said he wanted to surprise me. That night, he texted me and said that he didn't want to be with me anymore. Not because of my padding, but because I'd lied to him. He said he couldn't be in a relationship based on lies. To my surprise, he even said he thought I looked just as pretty as always, and it was my laugh, my eyes, and sweet nature that first attracted him to me. I instantly regretted lying to him. Turns out that with a padded bikini top or not, he would have approached me in the resort anyway, and we would have still been in a relationship. Now it was too late. I'd lost him for good. I knew I needed to make a change, so I ditched the padding and decided to be proud of my body. I also posted pictures of me in tops without the padding on my social media, with the caption, "Proud of who I am." The first day back to school was nerve-wracking, but luckily for me, I had Amy and Lizzie by my side. The other kids were pointing and whispering over at me, but my friends shot them dirty looks and said to them, "What are you looking at?" Then to my surprise, I was applying lip gloss in the toilets when this one girl came over to me and said, "You look amazing. I wish I was as confident as you." Yeah, so some of the boys started teasing me again, but you know what? I honestly didn't care. I only had Liam on my mind, so what they said didn't matter to me at all anymore. One of them even had awful acne, and the other had greasy hair, but I had better things to do than to make unnecessary marks about this to them. So, whatever, I was over it. Now, my story isn't finished yet, as one day after school, I arrived home to find Liam standing at my doorstep with packets of Nerds, which is the candy we were eating on the day we became an official couple. I was so surprised to see him there. He passed them to me and said, "Cammy, I'm sorry for my initial reaction to you. I knew it was wrong of me not to think about your feelings. I should have placed myself in your shoes to understand the reason why you did that. I'm so sorry. I have the most fun when I'm with you, and not having you around, well, I suppose you can say I've missed you loads. Could you please forgive me?" I couldn't stop smiling as I replied, "Yes, I've missed you loads too." I ran into his arms and we'd been together ever since. Naturally, Amy was a bit skeptical at first, as she'd seen how upset I was when he ended it the first time. But once she met him, she realized how perfect we are together. Oh, and there's one more thing. Now I'm 17 and my body has changed, and guess what? I now have an hourglass figure. I guess I was just a slow bloomer, but I got there in the end. So, the moral of my story is that everybody is great just the way they are. Yes, I know you've probably heard this 1,000 times, but just try it. Stand in front of the mirror and tell yourself what makes you unique. Try to love who you are and don't be afraid to show it. Oh, and never forget that confidence is sexy. I did this and it worked. My life became the life I dreamed of. Also, be patient. Don't rush yourself and your body into something it isn't ready for, as trust me, this doesn't work. Everything comes in good time, and there's always a reason for that. I now realize that I had to learn to love my body first, and then step by step, my life fell into place.
Hey, Haley again. So, in the last episode, my life was currently one big mess. Not only had I found out that my boyfriend Eric was dating the superstar Clara, but now some jerks were trying to kidnap me in the park. Luckily, someone came to my rescue. I turned around to see who it was, and OMG, it was Kurt. I've never been so pleased to see someone in all of my life. The boy gripping my arm said to Kurt,
"I suggest you get out of here. Can't you see we're kind of busy here?"
Kurt replied,
"Let her go. Don't let me hurt you."
They both laughed and grabbed my arm harder as they pulled me forward. I tried wriggling free, but they were both just too strong. It was horrible, and I cried out in pain. Immediately, Kurt charged towards them and started fighting them off me. Wow, I'd never seen this side of Kurt before. He was like the Hulk. After a few minutes, the two boys ran off in fear. When they were both far enough away from Kurt, they turned around and shouted,
"You little turd! You just wait!"
Then they hurried away. Those boys scared me to death. But I didn't want to appear like a weak little girl to Kurt, so I just smiled and said, "Thanks, bro. Those karate classes definitely paid off." Kurt looked furious. He yelled at me.
"What are you doing here? And at this time? It's late now. Don't you know it?"
I muttered out, I had something on my mind and didn't realize the time, but It's okay now. You're here and saved me. Forget it. Let's go home. I'm hungry. He frowned at me.
Don't change the subject. It's because of Eric, right? Is he worth it, Haley?
I couldn't help but burst into tears upon hearing that. Did I do something wrong? He told me to believe him, so I believed him blindly, no matter what happened. Even when he didn't text me back. Even when those rumors were everywhere. But you know what? He's left me for Clara. And he didn't even bother to tell me this himself. I heard it from his manager. Kurt said,
Haley, he doesn't deserve you. Trust me, that jerk's not worth it.
I sniffed. But I still love him, even when he hurt me so much. I sat down on the ground and cried even louder. Kurt sat down next to me and patted my head.
Don't be sad. You're gonna be a massive star, much bigger than him or his stupid girlfriend. And then make him regret. Now, let me take you home.
I nodded my head, and he put his arm around my shoulders to comfort me as we walked. The next morning, when I was lying on my bed in my PJs, Anna and Kurt came to my room and asked me to go out to get some fresh air. I didn't feel like going anywhere, but sitting around moping wasn't doing me any good. Anna brushed my hair and picked me out an outfit. Then Kurt drove us all to the park. Kurt and I were sitting on the bench and waiting for Anna to buy some ice cream. I asked, "What were you doing in the park last night anyway?" I thought it was over, but luckily, you were there. Kurt replied,
I passed the park while coming home, so I decided to walk around to get some fresh air. Then I heard your voice, so I ran to see what was happening.
I smiled. Wow, how lucky was I, right? Thanks a lot, Kurt. Kurt nudged me and said,
I hate seeing you like this. Why do you have to hurt yourself for someone who doesn't belong to you?
His words have shaken me. Kurt was right. I wasn't myself. I'd turned into a version of myself I didn't like. To try and hold onto a boy who'd already let me go? As much as it hurt, last night had made me realize that I needed to face the truth. I sighed and replied, You're right. It's time to let him go and live my own life. Suddenly, Kurt told me,
I'm always here for you, and I'm happy to wait.
I turned to him, smiled, and replied, You're my best friend, Kurt, and I care about you. But preventing someone from finding their true love is just as bad as keeping someone who doesn't love you. You deserve the world, and I can't give you that, just as Eric can't give it to me. Kurt gave a disappointed sigh. I didn't want to hurt him, but I couldn't lie to him either. My heart didn't belong to him. After going out with Kurt and Anna, I felt much better about everything. I realized that music was still my only love and passion, and I needed to focus on it and not let anything else get in the way. We were about to graduate soon, and I didn't have much time, so I wanted to dedicate all this precious time to the swing club. The school ceremony was coming, and I wanted to take this opportunity to have a memorable performance, but Phil still insisted on not letting me sing his song. What a stingy boy! I didn't understand what his problem was with me. Why did he have to view me as his enemy? Then, one time, when I was walking past the practice room, I saw Phil training with some other members. OMG! Why could he let everyone but me sing his song? So I walked into the room and greeted him with a wave, but he just kept his poker face as if he didn't see me. Ugh! This guy thought he's Ice Prince or what? He just glared at me.
Do you mind? Auditions are going on here, and you're not invited.
Jeez. Why was he being like this? He wasn't even giving me a chance. I was about to leave the room when I stopped dead on my feet, then walked right up to him. Yes, actually, I do mind. The least you can do is let me audition. He was silent for a minute. Then he replied,
You want to sing my song, right? Fine. But first, you have to rewrite the sheet music of this song 100 times. By practice tomorrow.
What? This boy was crazy. He didn't want me to sing his songs, so he thought of this pointless prank? There was no way I would let his wish be fulfilled. So I replied, 100 times, right? Fine by me, but make sure you keep your promise. He thought I couldn't do it, huh? I'll show him who he's messing with. I went home in a rage and started on it right away. It took me all night to write out his song 100 times. By the end of it, the song was completely embedded in my head. Well, it's a good tune at least. The next day in practice, I placed the copies down in front of him. Here are your 100 copies. You can check them if you want. Phil looked at me surprised and sneaked a smile. Unexpectedly, you're quite persistent. So, after copying it 100 times, do you know the reason why I don't let you sing my song? I smirked. Of course, yes. It's because you hate me. Really, really hate me, right? Phil knocked on my head and said, Nah, it's not that. You're so confident in your ability that you always change musical notes or the pitch of the song to the way you want them. You never think about the intention of the composer in every musical note, and I can't accept it. What Phil said surprised me, but also made me feel ashamed. That's true. I have always varied the song in my way, as I believed that it would be better to show my singing ability. But I've never thought about how the songwriters must have felt. Was I too confident? Phil slapped my shoulder and said, Stop thinking. After writing down those notes over and over, I guess every note is in your head, right? If you spontaneously change the song without informing me, there won't be another chance. He left, then turned back and shouted, Tomorrow afternoon, 3 p.m., in the training room. Remember? The school's 50th anniversary was just around the corner, so it was practice, practice, practice. At least it kept me busy and took my mind off Eric. Besides, it turns out Phil wasn't as hateful as I thought. He was actually a great teacher, and I found that my singing skill has improved a lot. All my practicing paid off, as my performance at the concert was awesome. I've never received such loud applause before. Moreover, the performance was so successful that its video uploaded on the fan page of Swing Club went viral and attracted thousands of views and shares. Maybe Phil was right. I have always focused on showing my voice and forgot that the success of a song wasn't only based on the voice of the singer. Then, Phil came up to me at lunchtime and told me we should release the song and upload it to YouTube. He even suggested we make a professional music video for it. I thought it was extremely insane and impossible. But he said, Come on, Haley. Don't you feel wasted working so hard and only singing a song once? Please give this a shot. Let the world see what they're missing. Okay, so what Phil said made sense. I've always tried to perform perfectly on the stage with the hope that someone would realize my talent and help me become famous. I mean, it worked for others, as well as Eric, but that didn't mean it would work for me. I'd never considered producing a music video by myself. Phil's songs were great, and so was my voice. The last performance was proof of this. So, I agreed with Phil, and we decided to ask for other members' help to produce it. The next few months were crazy busy. We recorded the song, found a location for the video, hired a director and a cameraman. I was worried about the cost, but Phil said he'd cover it, and I could pay him back my share when I was famous. Luckily, other members of Swing Club, especially Kurt and Anna, helped us a lot. Anna was in charge of costumes and makeup, and Kurt was useful with the technical stuff. As for Phil, he became one of my best friends. In fact, we were so close, the other club members called us matching cards of Swing Club. And luckily, all our hard work paid off, as the music video was a massive success and went viral. Wow, this was crazy! As well as having millions of views, there were also so many positive comments and compliments, and this was all in just a few weeks. Okay, so I wasn't a big star yet, but this was a start. My time at school flew by, and my graduation ceremony arrived. I'd had a turbulent last 3 years, but I'd learned so much at West High, and being in the Swing Club, as well as improving my art and maturing, I'd made some amazing lifelong friends. After the ceremony, Kurt, Anna, Phil, and I lay on the grass. I spoke up. I'm going to LA to learn more about music, as it's my biggest passion and also my talent. I will try my best to become a singer, instead of just waiting for luck. Phil agreed with me. He would come to LA and live with passion. Kurt and Anna were different. They decided to enroll in some universities over on the east side. Kurt wanted to step into the musical theater major, and Anna went with the classical music path, so New York was better for them. Everyone had their own plan, and I'm so happy for us all. But suddenly, I thought about Eric. Today was the graduation ceremony, but he was absent. I remembered when we sat together and thought about the future and said that we would enroll in a university that specialized in music in LA and try to become famous singers. But he was already famous and successful. I couldn't help but wonder if our promise of singing on the same stage together would ever be fulfilled.
I always told myself I would never get married. To me, marriage seemed like the worst thing in the world, and who could blame me? My dad had cheated on my mom constantly, and I felt like it was all my fault. I once heard him say when I was a kid that he only stayed with my mom because he'd accidentally got her pregnant. So basically, he resented me. And that was what my childhood was like. My dad made it torture. I decided I never wanted to grow up to be like him, and then I would stay single forever. But then everything changed the day I met a girl named Carrie. I'm Nico, by the way. And before I get into the chaos of what happened after I met Carrie, let me just say that she was the most beautiful, smart, amazing girl I'd ever met. And I was definitely not the only guy who felt that way. However, never in a million years did I think she would hurt me in a way that was almost even worse than how my dad hurt my mom. You see, my dad cheated on my mom the whole time when I was growing up. They always argued, since my mom had suspicions of his cheating, but nothing was ever proven. Then finally, my mom caught him with his coworker. So they divorced when I was only 9 years old. It put a lot of strain on my life because I had to split my time between the two of them. And my dad was always out on dates with different women, so I pretty much raised myself when I was at his place. This really affected my relationship with him, and we never got close because he was always too busy. As for my mom, she took years to get over what my dad had done. And so it just made sense to me to not focus on girls. Instead, I spent all my time drawing. While all the other guys went out on dates, I was making comic books. Relationships just seemed too messy. At one point, my friend teased me and asked me if I was gay. But I just told him that my dad had ruined my mom's life, and I didn't want the same thing to happen to me. Instead, I focused on college and getting my art degree. So, when I met Carrie, you can imagine how life-changing it was for me. I never expected to meet someone because I wasn't even looking for it. But it was love at first sight, and I couldn't stop myself. Little did I know how much that relationship would mess up my entire life, though, and in more ways than one. We met at a comic meet-and-greet event. I work as a comic book artist. And when I saw her walking towards my stand at the event, I got so nervous. I'm a little nerdy, so seeing a gorgeous girl walking towards me was crazy, but we hit it off immediately. Turned out she was a big fan of my work and loved that I was slightly nerdy. So that first evening, I went against my word that I'd never date and asked her out. She was so supportive of my comic books, and it was so encouraging for me. She didn't care that I wasn't super rich or famous. She just liked me for who I was. So within a month, I was in love with her. No one had ever supported me like that before. My dad had basically been absent my whole life, and my mom was still so depressed about stuff with my dad. Carrie was the first person to push me to really chase this dream. After 4 months, I decided to propose to her. For the first time, I understood why people got into relationships. I had never been so happy. If only it could have lasted. Our wedding day was interesting, let's just put it that way. Of course, Carrie looked so beautiful in her dress, and I must admit I scrubbed up pretty well too. But there was one thing I wished I could have changed about that day. For some reason, my dad was in the worst mood. Ever since I'd met Carrie, he'd been acting even colder towards me. And I figured he was just jealous, because all his relationships had been complete failures. Honestly, of all the days for him to act like this, my wedding day, it made me so angry. My whole life I'd put up with feeling like a burden to him. And now on my big day, he couldn't even crack a smile. I even overheard him saying something about how I didn't deserve a girl like Carrie. It made me sick that he couldn't just be happy for me. I asked Carrie to try and talk to him and get him to calm down a bit, so she did. She was so sweet and could comfort anyone. And my dad seemed to like her more than he liked me. I left it to her and made the rounds to chat with the other guests. But then when it came time to sit down for dinner, I couldn't find her. It was kind of awkward because everyone was waiting. And then, just when I really started to panic, she appeared with my dad. They'd obviously been talking for a while. But at least my dad looked more relaxed, and he even smiled at me at one point, so I figured she'd done something right. At least I could enjoy the night and not worry that my dad would ruin it by saying something stupid. So the rest of the wedding night went well, and then we went on our honeymoon. It was fun, but Carrie seemed a little off. She spent a lot of time on her phone, and I'd hoped we'd spend more quality time together. I mean, it was our honeymoon after all. There were a few times where she even pulled away when I tried to kiss her, and I started to feel insecure. Had we moved too fast? I was seriously feeling anxious. Anyway, we still had a nice holiday, and I tried not to overthink it. We got back from our honeymoon, and my dad came to visit a few days later. This was weird because he never visited me. In fact, he did his complete best to avoid me. But now that I was with Carrie, maybe he wanted to make up for lost time and make a good impression. Maybe Carrie would help my dad and I finally get close. But one day after he'd left, I found a bag with some revealing lingerie inside. I called him and asked him if he'd forgotten something, and then he just laughed and said, "Oh, it's for Carrie, and for you. You gotta keep that spark going, right, son?" I was shocked. What a weird gift to buy your daughter-in-law. It made me kind of uncomfortable. My dad clearly had no idea that this was inappropriate, though. It was so embarrassing. Anyway, Valentine's Day was coming up, and I decided to surprise Carrie. Recently, she'd been quite distant, and I figured I needed to do something super romantic to get her to notice me again. I decided to leave work early and surprise her with a rose petal bath. I even bought some nice candles, and I was thinking I'd cook her a delicious meal, too. But when I got home, my dad's car was in the driveway. That's weird, I thought. I wasn't expecting him. And when I went inside, I couldn't see him anywhere. "Dad?" I called, but there was no reply. I went upstairs, and that's when I noticed our bedroom door was closed. I opened it, and my worst nightmare came true. My dad was in bed with my wife. And no, they weren't just hanging out talking, they were full-on French kissing. I thought I was going to collapse. My whole body started shaking, and Carrie suddenly jumped up. "Nico!" she screamed, covering her chest with the sheet. "What are you doing home so early?" I couldn't hold back the tears. I seriously couldn't believe that Carrie would do something like this to me, and with my dad. To make it worse, my dad started laughing. I felt like I was going to explode, so I went right over to him and punched him in the face and asked him to get out of my house. Carrie jumped in between us to stop me from hurting him, and this just made me even more upset. Why was she protecting him? Eventually, he managed to escape and left the house. Then I asked Carrie to pack up all her stuff and get the heck out too. I never wanted to see either of them again, and I screamed at Carrie as she left saying I'd be filing for divorce right away. Honestly, I never thought Carrie would cheat on me. It hadn't even crossed my mind. I felt so betrayed. As she left with her suitcases, I felt completely crushed. I had no idea where she'd go to live now, but it's not hard to guess. My life was over. My own dad, who'd treated me terribly my whole life, had now gone and done the worst possible thing. Stolen my wife from me. It took me a while to get to grips with it all. Even now, I'm still disturbed. And I think back to our wedding day, and I know that's when it all started. Carrie hadn't just cheered my dad up. She'd been seduced by him. No wonder they looked so weird that evening. The way my dad kept smiling, it all made sense now. It's been a year since the whole thing happened. And I haven't spoken to either of them since then, and I don't plan to. They both betrayed me, and they don't deserve a second of my time. I did check Carrie's social media once, and she's still with my dad. Posts all these photos of them together and calls him hubby, even though they aren't married. I talked to my uncle about it, and he said he saw my dad with another woman at the golf course one day, so I guess that's karma. Carrie cheated on me, and now she's getting cheated on. Well, that's her problem now. I think it's time for me to ignore them and to regain my faith to live a better life. God always offers what we deserve.
Hey, it's Austin here again. So I met this hot girl called Darcy that I really like, and I think she really likes me too. But then a phone mix-up meant I had to date this cougar called Chelsea, who was also dating my friend Jake. I know, awkward. Things got even worse when Chelsea introduced me to her employees as her boyfriend. But then I saw Darcy standing there. Oh no, the girl I like works for Chelsea? This was bad, really bad. Darcy looked so disappointed. Man, this sucked. For the rest of the date, I kept turning around to check on her. I even tried sending her a text to assure her it wasn't what it looked like. But this was tricky to do when Chelsea wouldn't take her eyes off of me. Do you know her? Darcy? You keep looking at her. So, is there something between you guys? I just shrugged and said, Nah, she comes into the restaurant sometimes, that's all. She must have seen right through my words, as she smirked then said, Is that so? Well, then you won't mind me firing her. Unless, of course, you continue to date me, but don't tell Jake or anyone about it. Deal? Turns out Chelsea was even crazier than I thought. She was playing me and I didn't like it, not one bit. But I couldn't stand by and let Darcy lose her job because of me. I knew how much it meant to her. Fine, I replied, but no kissing or anything like that. She grinned back. Whatever, you'll fall for my charm soon enough. As if. She was deluded, like I'd ever want to kiss someone who treated me like prey. Anyway, I only had to put up with this until Darcy finished her internship, then signed her contract. Later on, I texted Darcy explaining that Chelsea was just a friend and nothing more, but she didn't seem convinced. From then on, whenever she came into the restaurant, she barely met my eye, even when I gave her an extra slice of dessert. Ouch. Worse still, I kept on bumping into Darcy when I was on dates with Chelsea. Whether it was the coffee shop, walking the street, or going into a restaurant, she always seemed to be there to spot us. And Chelsea didn't help at all as she kept on clinging on to me and acted up when she noticed Darcy was around. Dating Chelsea was hard work. She just wouldn't quit pestering me. It felt like every time I wasn't working, she dragged me out to some posh restaurant or the theater or something. Yawn. When was she going to get the hint that I didn't have feelings for her? I hoped she'd figured it out soon enough, as things were getting awkward between me and Jake. I hated having to lie to him. Then he messaged me saying he was feeling really down, as he was pretty sure Chelsea was seeing some other dude. Aw man, why was I stuck in this mess? I messaged him back telling him she was probably just busy with work, and not to panic. Now all I needed to do was convince Chelsea to be a one-man woman, and choose Jake. On our next date, Chelsea took me to this expensive Italian, and oh my God, the food was so good. But even that didn't make up for how tedious the date was. She just sat there staring at me like she wanted to eat me or something. It made me feel so uncomfortable. Later that night, I was at home watching a movie and wondering how I could end things with Chelsea when I heard an angry thud at my door. I opened it, and to my surprise, it was Jake. He yelled out, I thought you didn't care about Chelsea. Guess you've seen me being well treated and now you want that too? Step aside. I tried telling him I didn't want her, but this only made him madder. What, so you don't want her, just her money? How can you do that to Chelsea? She's beautiful and smart and, Jake, she made me. If I don't do this, then she's going to fire Darcy. Oh, and set her brother on us both. She's got me on a string, bro. I had no choice. I sighed and looked away to avoid his eyes. Jake's face fell as he took in this news. Then he muttered out, Oh well, I guess I knew what she was like. I felt bad for him, but what did he expect? Of course, she was only playing with him. And even he himself knew that he only had himself to blame for falling for her act. He said, Right, whatever. She needs to learn a lesson at least. We can't just let her get off with this that easily. Anyway, she could only do harm to Darcy during this internship period, right? Yep, and not anymore when Darcy signs the contract in a month. Okay then, let's play some pranks on Chelsea. We'll let her experience one glorious month of a cheater. I was kinda excited about messing with Chelsea. She certainly deserved it for ruining my chances with Darcy. Let the fun begin. So Jake asked her to go on dates when he knew she was on dates with me. Then when she made up excuses, he rang her up and sobbed out how she never wanted to spend time with him anymore. Then another time when I was on a date with her, I went to the bathroom. Then Jake stormed into the restaurant and demanded to know what she was doing there. He made sure he left before I got back, but it was so funny walking over to the table and seeing her look all flustered. The problem was that as fun as these pranks on her were, they didn't change the fact I still had to date her. Then she told me I had to escort her to the swanky event dinner her company was having. The only exciting parts of the night were eating the food and, of course, seeing Darcy. Wow, nothing could prepare me for how stunning she looked. Unfortunately, Chelsea's brother Tim had noticed this too, and he kept on creeping around her. I saw him offer her drinks and put his arm around her. I wanted to go and drag her away from him so badly, but I had my own problems, as Chelsea led me from group to group and introduced me to them all as her boyfriend. Ugh. Finally, when Chelsea was in the bathroom, I managed to go over to Darcy. Only Tim was with her. He was kinda tipsy and was slurring out his words as he asked her to hang out with him and his friends after the event. Poor Darcy. She looked so uncomfortable. So I said, "Hey Darcy, Chelsea wants to talk to you. It sounds pretty urgent. She's waiting for you outside." I led the way. Then when we stepped outside and it was just the two of us, I said, "Sorry it took me so long to save you from that creep. Are you okay?" She couldn't even look me in the eye as she replied, "I can look after myself." Then she went to walk back inside, so I pulled her back and said, "Please, Darcy, wait. It's time I told you everything." So I told her all about the mishap with the phone on our first meeting in the coffee shop, how Chelsea forced me and Jake to date her, then how she was threatening to fire Darcy if I didn't go on dates with her. At first, Darcy rolled her eyes and muttered, "Yeah, right." But after I mentioned the part about her job, she seemed to believe me. She let out a long sigh. "Chelsea does talk about you all the time. Now I know why." Then she said I didn't need to do this for her anymore, as she didn't intend on staying at the company anyway. It was too toxic of an environment for her, and her colleagues treated her so badly just because she was a pretty newbie. Then she said the main reason why she didn't quit the internship was because of me. Every time she came to my restaurant, I would cheer her up and make her feel much better. Okay, so this counted as her confessing her feelings for me, right? "Give me 1 week to do what I need to do. Then I'm leaving that awful place," she told me. "That sounds doable." I smiled at her. I hugged her, then we went back inside as if nothing happened. The following week was so exciting. I couldn't wait till I could finally be with Darcy. I told Jake all about it, and he decided to play one last joke on Chelsea. And there's no way I was missing this one. So I hid around the corner and watched as he turned up her doorstep and told her he couldn't be with her anymore because he couldn't stop thinking about her brother Tim. The shock on her face was priceless. Then she started yelling at him that she didn't want him to contact her ever again and to stay away from her brother. We had such a laugh. Jake's my best friend, and I really do wish him all the best only. Hopefully now that Chelsea's out of his life, he can move on. And finally, Darcy quit her job, and now I can do what I first intended to do, before this phone and crazy woman mess got in the way, and that's to take the prettiest girl I've ever seen in my life on a date. It was just such a long and messy journey to get here, but good things take time, right?